I'm Mike Nannery. I'm Assistant Director for Utilities. I'm going to talk a little bit about the utility proffers for this project. We have broken this project into like two separate categories. One where we are proffering conditions on both the east and the west side projects. That said, these are pretty basic proffers that you will recognize. Connection to the utilities water and wastewater system is being proffered, and we are coordinating with the applicant for that. This area in its totality is within the mandatory connection area for both public water and wastewater. With that said, we will have a provision that will allow any of the existing structures that are there that are anticipated to be residential until they redevelop could remain on their well and septic systems. We talked a lot with environmental about overall plans and master plans. You will see consistently utilities ask for overall utility plans as a proffer. We are looking for orderly expansion of our system to serve areas both within the development and upstream in our future customers. Part of that is reliability and redundancy. We want to make sure that if there is an outage for an unplanned pipe problem, that we can backfeed our areas. Some of that is details that are written into the proffers, and we are still coordinating with the applicant, the EDA, for some of that as well. Off-site improvements are also anticipated to be needed, especially for the western side, depending on what use actually comes there. So we have included that as one of the requested proffers. And dedication of easements. That's something that we want to make sure that if we need to get upstream of this area before the time of the project and development is done, that we can ask for those easements to be dedicated. And the applicant has been working on those with us. And those easements are done consistently with the utility master plan. What are we doing extra for the west? The master plan, the overall utility plan will be a lot more complicated because it's manufacturing. Our system currently is sized for that almost 1,400 residential units we talked about that the current zoning allows for. We'll be requiring detailed engineering analysis once we have a specific prospect in mind. Elevated water storage tank, Mr. Gillies mentioned that in his proposal. I would caveat that needs to be plural because we're not sure what that use will be. Out of the 8 uses, the data centers and the microchip processors are very dependent on our service. Offices, not so much. A wastewater pump station is a bulleted item in this slide as well. There is an area that is not served to the east currently with gravity. It flows towards the Appomattox River, and a wastewater pump station may be needed depending on how that develops to serve that area. Dedication of land, because we're going to have facilities, we are asking that the applicant dedicate land for both water tanks or a wastewater pump station if needed. 2-acre site for a water storage tank is typical, and a 3-acre minimum site is typical for a wastewater pump station. Lastly, on this slide, responsible parties for the west. The slides look like they're out of order, Steve. There we go, thank you. For the west is the developer. The developer's responsible for doing all the construction items and required infrastructure improvements to support the project. We will allow phasing as long as the phasing can take care of its demands for each part of the development. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Your part 2 of my question to Mr. Smedley. A couple of these industries require water, a lot of water, and some of that may be producing a hazardous byproduct that is going to be going back into the system. Do we have the ability to treat that water adequately based on contaminants that may be put into the water, specifically the pharmaceutical industry and chip manufacturing and maybe some of the plastics having to do with carcinogens that are eliminated during the cooling process?
Yes, sir, we do. We have a very robust pre-treatment program. If that is the case, what you were describing would be a permitted discharger to our system. We regulate them. Part of one of the things that Mr. Snedley was asked was about spill prevention. Interior floor drains that may spill that go to our system, we regulate and inspect for that. They would have to remove some of those substances that you mentioned prior to sending them to us and dispose of them in an appropriate manner.
Okay. The other question, on a wastewater pumping station site, does that involve an open air tank for storage prior to pumping, or is it just a pumping center where it continually pumps?
It would have a storage, we call it what is called a wet well. It is covered, it's not open air. If it is warranted, we will have odor control, corrosion control. Those are typical engineering things that we utility engineers like to plan for in our system, especially when they're regional.
Okay. I was asking because there's a concern in this area already about odor from another facility, and I wondered if this facility would have an odor issue, or is it contained and burned off like methane is at some facilities?
I'm not anticipating that with this facility based on what residence time the wastewater would have in the system, although we need to know what the characteristics of that wastewater are. So.
Other commissioners? All right, thank you, Mr. Nannery.